This is Scenic Roots Talking Writing. My guests are four very different writers and personalities with whom I have had a number of conversations individually, but this is the first time all four of them have been in the studio together. Helga Kidder, Cynthia Young, KB Ballantyne and Rachel Landrum Crumble meet monthly to read each other's writing and talk about it. I thought it'd be fun to have them recreate one of those meetings on the radio. When it came to it, they didn't think that would make for very interesting listening, so we dispensed with that formality and ended up just talking about what they write about, why they write about it, and eventually every one of them read some of their work. As you might imagine, it was quite a long conversation. This is the first part. The second half will be on next week's program.
Well, I think the point is for the writer to hear it in somebody else's voice, so they can hear where a stumble might be, to hear where a pause is or an uncertainty, or how the words sound coming from somebody else's mouth. Because even if I practice it out loud myself, I'm hearing what I think I wrote as opposed to perhaps what I actually wrote. And so that's how we catch spelling errors. And I know it seems, pedantic to say, oh, I misspelled that word. We all know how to spell. It's just that in our head that we spelled it right or we used the right word, and then we hear, and when we read it the first time, that's what we do. And the rest of us are going, and then we wait, and then when the second person reads it and they read what's on the paper, that's usually when the writer goes, and they're like, oopsie, they're making a little mark on their own paper, because after they've read it one time, they don't talk again. The idea is not to talk again. So somebody else will read it, and then everybody discusses what they think it means, and where some points, maybe this line needs to be moved here, or maybe it should start here instead, or maybe it should end here instead. And the person who wrote it just gets the opportunity to see what other people are thinking about what's on the page. And so it's good to have, like, not a proofreader, but like a revisionist helping you work on something.
Well, we didn't bring workshop poems today.
Yeah, we didn't bring workshop poems.
We brought finished poems.
Yeah,
we cleaned up good.
We cleaned ourselves up for you, Richard. Sometimes you can see people thinking that, biting their nails, going, "What? Why are they saying this? It doesn't mean that at all." And that's what's on the page, and that's what we're getting.
And that's what speaks. It's got to stand by itself.
That doesn't work in this setting. Is that because you're familiar with the poems? Is that why?
It's because we've already gone through this process with each other.
With these poems that we brought.
Yeah.
I mean, I have some new poems.
I didn't bring any of those poems. Yeah, so we're just different modus operandi, I guess.
You meet once a month? Is that right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Each time that you meet, you bring poems that nobody's seen before.
Yeah,
correct.
That's right.
Well, sometimes it may be a revision of a poem that we may have seen earlier, but usually it's a newly conceived poem. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Do you all write that often?
Oh yeah.
Do you? Yeah.
Every day.
If I have a fire
Every day?
under me.
Every morning.
We've been watching the documentary on the Beatles, the Get Back documentary.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
One of the fascinating things about it was watching Paul McCartney write that song, Get Back. It starts out in the first 2 hours of it's like 7-hour doc, He's just sitting there strumming the guitar, and he's got some lyrics, but the lyrics aren't anything like the finished song. But he's got the melody. Mm-hmm. And as far as I can tell, the melody just comes off the top of his head while he's playing.
Yeah.
It's just an amazing thing to watch. But it's instructive in that the creative process is so much more complicated than we think it is. Mm-hmm. And what comes out of the doc is he doesn't really finish the song, and they don't record it until the third section of the documentary. So this is like 3 weeks almost that they've been every day meeting, and at some point they've been playing the song or playing some iteration of it, And initially, Paul's a total control freak, He's not listening to what anybody else is saying. The second segment, his attitude's quite different. Well, if we can't all agree on this, then we won't do it, and it becomes very democratic, and everybody is helping him write lines, and it strikes me that that's essentially how you are working, right? That you have your working copy of the poem, but when you bring it to the others in the group, does it change?
Everybody has their own, we bring multiple
right.
copies, so everybody makes notes on the person's poem and gives it back to them so that they have the benefit of seeing what their responses were and what their suggestions were for revision, though we talk about it as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Each of you writes such different work, and have such a different approach to it.
But that's what's so very helpful is that the people who aren't interested in actually workshopping their poem generally don't last, or they don't come to every one. Those of us who are committed to our work, who know that we're committed to the other people in our group, I trust their voices. I trust what they're going to write on my paper. If somebody new comes to our group, I'll look at what they have to say, but I probably wouldn't treat it with the same consideration that I would give to the people who are always there, whose work I've seen, who make intelligent comments, who are not hyper negatively critical, who are only saying things that are supportive, even if it's something that's not working in your work. It's said in such a way that you can walk away from that and still feel good about what you wrote and good about the people that you were working with. And that's what's important in our group.
It would seem to me that the first thing is that you're all sensitive to how it feels to have your work criticized. And you also all understand how much work goes into having written something.
Yeah. Yes.
And there's always the possibility that you, as the writer, can say, I don't want to change it. I don't want to have my poem go in that direction.
Yeah.
So that's what's there also. Sometimes I do that.
Sometimes I do too, Helga.
I say, what do they know?
Yeah. I don't blame you, Helga. I mean, okay, let's take as an example, Helga sent a poem. It's called 75th Birthday.
Oh, yeah.
Well, if somebody had the temerity...
I should have omitted the 75th. I realized that.
No.
Why?
Well, when you go among the writers, I'm pretty old.
Really?
And, yeah. So I always, and also the young people think you're not really with it. Well, she's writing about death and dying and being sick and so forth.
None of those things happen to young people.
Well, they write about love,
I know what they write
which
about,
is fun.
yeah.
Yes.
It's the same thing. Right?
That's what they say, but I just wonder about that.
To be honest, the older I get, the more I wonder who the heck you is.
Yeah.
Can't see it, can't find it. They can't show you on an X-ray.
Yeah.
It's not in your brain. It feels like it is, but it's not, right?
Yeah. And I don't know. I always think it's got to be very difficult to just let go But from experience, that when a person is dying, you have to tell them it's okay for you to go. Mm-hmm. So they say, okay, yeah, I'm all right. I'm not disappointing anyone. I'm not worried about leaving someone behind. I can go on. But we don't know exactly where. I mean,
we don't.
We're supposed to know through religion, but still there is a doubt, I think.
Our faith comes from believing that we do know. And I think that's what gives us the confidence to tell someone, you can let go, especially if they, believe the same thing, if they believe that there is a, eternity afterwards.
I hope someone will tell me that.
To let go and it'll be okay.
In another 30 years, maybe we will.
Yeah.
Would you like to read your... How about... Would it be okay with you then if you read the poem? We've just got to talk about whatever the poem is saying.
Yeah.
Sure. We can do that.
I've taught English. I know how it is to lead critiques. It's hellish. Especially for the poor beggar who's being critiqued.
Well, I think it'd be okay. Yep. It's already written in stone, so it's not going to change.
How old is this poem? How long ago did you write it?
I wrote that in 2018 or 19, after my sister died. Yes. Probably in 2019. You want me to read it?
Yeah. Sorry, Helga. When you said that, you were saying before that when you were in school that you spent 2 years writing about the death of your mum.
Yes.
Was it the same when you lost your sister? Did you have the same reaction to it?
It was different. I was very connected to my mother because of the way I grew up. I had to sleep in a single bed pushed against the wall with my mother till I was in 7th grade. So we were bodily very close. And even though I left home when I was 21, there was this, the umbilicus had never been cut off. And when she died, I finally realized I had to be me now. I couldn't be connected to my mother because everything I did, I would ask, write or call my mother, well, what should I do in everything? Mm-hmm. And when she died, I really had to come into my own, yes. And that was very difficult. But when my sister died, it was, I didn't realize I was so close to my sister because we had been living apart for 35 years. And when she died, I realized that suddenly I didn't have a connection to the person, to her, talking about my mother, for instance. We could talk about things we experienced. And so that was a realization that was really new. It was very much a surprise to me that I had been closer to my sister than I thought I was. Yeah.
Well, that in some ways, I think maybe answers the question about who are you. That you is often defined by the people we're closest to and our relationship with them, our relationship with our parents, with our siblings, Yeah. With all those children, do you have that experience?
I don't think I've stepped into that role of really deeply thinking about being their mother. I think more like Helga, think about my mother, my relationship to her. versus how are my kids seeing me.
But your children look to you for that same affirmation of themselves,
I have no
don't they?
idea.
They don't?
I don't.
You don't talk about that?
I don't know that. I mean, I have to die and listen in. Oh, they thought about that.
They take her for granted. She's wonderful, and they know she's wonderful, but she's there. So they kind of take her for granted. Sometimes I want to put my fists up for her. Sorry, guys.
What about you, Rachel? What's your relationship like with your children? Have you had that same experience, that sense of you're helping them form their identity, and especially now with grandchildren?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a surprise after the intensity of just day-to-day motherhood, to get to the point where, oh my gosh, this part really does get over with. Like, whoa. It felt like...
All of a sudden, does it seem like it's all of a sudden that it stops?
Well, when they leave home and you don't see them every day, and I wasn't trying to be a control freak, so I was trying to, it's like, oh, wow. Still the burden of concern, but not trying to control. So, yeah, just the changes in the role. And now I'm astounded that, like, my kids like me. They don't just love me, they like me. What? What a gift that is. I'm thankful. Yeah.
Do you think a grandparent has more of a opportunity to shape personality and attitudes than parents, because they're one step removed, right?
Yeah, I'm not the one. I mean, I just have 4-month-old grandchildren.
I know, you haven't got there yet.
And my grandparents were far away, and I loved them, but they didn't live nearby. So this is a whole new experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think grandparents have the opportunity that parents have, because unless the children live with the grandparents, it's not an everyday thing. And I think to help shape identity, you need to see them on a pretty consistent basis.
But Cynthia knows. She's got a tribe around her. Ask Cynthia.
Well, I was raised by, my grandmother lived with us.
Yeah.
So
In that case,
a lot of my poems are about her, because she was really an integral part of how I view the world, the lens I look through. So when I started becoming, when I was a new parent, I was taking those lessons, that she taught me more than what my mother taught me. And that's still pretty much there. So now, as a grandmother, I see the role, how important that is. And so I do take it seriously. I try to connect. I think I have 16 grandchildren. And so I try to connect with all of them on some kind of level, just to make sure that, when I do die, they'll like, oh yeah, we did have a grandmother. Some of them are pretty little. So.
I'm going to take almost everything you say with a pinch of salt, Cynthia.
Okay.
I'm sure that's not true at all. I'm sure they have a profound relationship with you, I would think, just because of the kind of person you are and your openness.
It's kind of like when you're driving a car and you're driving on the tires and you're not thinking about how great the tires are until you get it flat.
Yeah, right, exactly. And I just always found it easy. Pretty much always found it easier to relate to my grandmother than to my mother. Easier to talk to her, because, and looking back on it, I feel for my mother, because she has the immediacy of it. It's that sense of responsibility for the aberrant little hooligan that you've become, How did that happen? Whereas the grandmother's like, it'll pass. Got some distance on it.
Yeah.
It's great to have both, though. Both those points of view all the time. Sorry, Helga, would you like to read your poem?
All right. That 75th birthday?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And this poem was inspired by my niece, Suzanne. 75th birthday. Good wishes, written in sand for me at the beach of Fuerteventura, where you straddle waves. You sent me Mario de Andrade's poem, all the way from Spain to Savannah, where Spanish moss hangs like a veil over the beloved. Here the cat meows at the door, and the puppy paws my knee, while morning sun lounges in the lawn, plays hide and seek in living oaks. I'd like to think I'm still in summer, yet fall reveals a tree's true self, the bare bones of being. De Andrade writes, life is a plate of candies. Have I eaten mine too fast? I listen to the whispers inside me, browsing the last handful before the veil frays into a shroud.
I think my favorite lines are about the tree.
Yeah.
Our house is surrounded by trees. And so in the summer and the spring, you can't see much beyond them. At this time of the year, it's like, oh, wow. It looks out over downtown and across to the mountain, and there's all these details that aren't apparent. And I think that's a wonderful metaphor, because if there's any upside to getting older, it's that things become clearer.
Yes.
Mm.
The things that you thought were important, you realize aren't really that important. So many of the distractions and the entertainments.
Well, it's true. You finally realize your life is probably at the end stage, and you really take care to make the best of each day.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Even when it doesn't feel right or perfect, you can go beyond that. Yes.
Which is, you know, that's the advice given to us when we're young, right?
Yes.
And we don't do it.
No. Well, we don't understand it.
Right.
There are too many distractions when you're young, I think.
Perhaps we're more easily distracted because everything's fresh.
Correct.
It's new to us, isn't it?
Not experienced yet.
Does it help to write about it?
Yes, it does help to write about it, because it gets out of your system when you are melancholic. And if you write about it, and then you can say, okay, now I'll go on.
It's kind of an existential question, isn't it? If you like, you know, back to that notion again of what is you, in some way that's a way to define it when you write.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Yeah. Yeah, I think we're blessed with enough seasoning that we kind of know, but we're discovering the next step as we write. Yeah. So that is a blessing.
Well, you're at an interesting point at the moment, because you're about to publish your first collection of poems.
Mm-hmm.
You held off on that. You wanted to, you wanted
say
to,
that.
you wanted, you wanted a publisher. You wanted to do the whole thing as a kind of marker, as a way of saying, this is me, Rachel. But at the same time, it's me, Rachel, over quite a long span of time.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's true.
So is it almost like looking at a diary when you look at the collection of poems?
Not a diary, because I've kept journals, and I hear a lot more recordings of the same thing over and over again that are discouraging when I read my journals. But I also am pleased with some insights there too. But I think because language is more distilled in poetry, they are markers, definitely markers. Yeah, and I at this point in my life, I'm just like, yeah, that's where I was. I'm okay with that. That's where I was.
That's where you were, but you're not now.
No, not necessarily.
Right.
But it also captured a moment in time that I wanted to preserve. So I'm thankful for that it was preserved. So, yeah.
So the difference between when you write in the journal, which is essentially just trying to get your thoughts on the page.
Yes.
When you write a poem, there's a lot of, that's why you all come together, right? Is to help shape it and to distill it, if you will.
Yeah, that there's something from the private confession to something public that needs to, some insight that is knocking around inside of each of us that wants to be shared. And so we help each other unearth it.
Yeah, it's a little marker of we were here. Mm-hmm. And while we may still sit here and write a few more poems about that, at some point we move from that marker to the next space.
I'm laughing because of Sister Sorrow, because there's just a lot of grief and depression poems in there, but there's still growth. And it's not like some maudlin staying in one place with it. There's not stasis. There's still movement, but it's
right. Well, and you as a person, you are not that way at all.
Right. Okay.
So I think that those were your markers.
Yeah.
And in order to be the happy, bubbly person that I can consider you, that I think you are right now, I think you had to let go of that. But I mean, you had to write it to let it go.
Yeah.
So writing, in some sense, is a hedge against mortality.
Sure. Yeah. We all want to leave a mark. It's true.
Well, I was just thinking about Emily Dickinson.
Yes, I love Emily Dickinson.
Me too.
Yeah.
We all know who she is.
Right.
And yet, in her lifetime,
in her day.
Probably very few people did, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe like 7 people.
So the notion that you're old, Helga, you're not old at all. On the page, you're ageless.
Exactly. And yes, yeah. And I think it's really important to write whatever poems you put on the page. Even if it doesn't get published, your family will not forget you because you have it written down. Mm-hmm. They don't even have to remember because it's there for them. And that's sometimes important for me too, especially in my new book, Learning Curve. I'm talking about that in, more in detail about what it means to leave that history for your family.
While at the same time, what you're writing at any given moment is an expression of how you're feeling at that moment.
Yes.
So you're not necessarily thinking in terms of posterity.
Well,
no.
So when people come behind you to read it, what they get is Helga at that moment, which is, that in that sense, transcends mortality.
Well, yes, and like in one poem, I give them instructions what to do with my ashes, so they know exactly what to do.
My conversation with Helga Kidder, KB Ballantyne, Cynthia Young, and Rachel Landrum Crumble will continue on next week's program. On listener-supported public radio in Chattanooga, this is Scenic Roots, Talking Writing.